The first clue arrived disguised as noise. A scream buried inside the death of a star. Far beyond the regulated trade lanes of the Federation, beyond the polished core worlds where senators spoke of peace beneath artificial skies, the Keeler drift floated in darkness like the corpse of a forgotten god. The system had been dead for 200 years. Every Academy textbook said the same thing: a catastrophic human navigation failure had triggered a stellar chain reaction, annihilating 12 inhabited worlds in seconds. Billions gone. Humanity blamed. History closed. But history had a habit of rotting from the inside. Commander Elias Vey stood alone on the observation deck of the reconnaissance cruiser Odyssey, staring through reinforced crystal as fragments of shattered planets drifted slowly through the void. Ice-covered debris spun silently beneath pale starlight. Broken stations floated like skeletons. Even after centuries, the graveyard still looked fresh, as if the system itself remembered dying. The bridge behind him remained quiet except for the low mechanical hum of the ship's engines and the occasional burst of static from long-range scanners. Nobody liked being here. The crew felt it the moment they crossed into the drift. An invisible pressure. Like walking into a tomb where something was still awake. Elias could feel it too. His jaw tightened as another wave of distorted audio crackled through the comm systems. At first, it sounded meaningless. Random electromagnetic decay bouncing between asteroid fragments. Ancient radiation echoes. Dead signals from a dead civilization. But then the pattern repeated. 3 sharp bursts. A pause. Then a long, agonized distortion that almost sounded human. Lieutenant Mira Solon turned slowly from her console, her face pale beneath the cold blue glow of holographic displays. "Commander," she whispered carefully, "you need to hear this." Elias walked toward the central deck as the lights dimmed automatically around them. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody spoke. Outside the viewport, a fractured moon drifted across the stars like a closing eye. Mira isolated the signal. Static flooded the bridge. Then came the sound. Not language. Not exactly. A scream. Raw. Distorted. Ancient. It tore through the speakers with enough pain to freeze the air in the room. Some of the crew physically flinched. One technician ripped off his headset instantly, breathing hard. Another muttered a prayer beneath his breath. The recording lasted only 6 seconds. But in those 6 seconds, Elias felt something cold crawl down his spine. Because the voice wasn't panicked. It was betrayed. The audio ended abruptly, followed by silence so heavy it felt alive. Then the ship's intelligence spoke in its calm synthetic tone. Signal origin identified. A holographic marker appeared above the bridge. Sector Theta 9. Deep within the debris field. An object. Small. Artificial. Buried beneath 2 centuries of wreckage. Elias stared at the coordinates without blinking. His pulse had begun to quicken, though he didn't fully understand why. Officially, the Keeler drift investigation had ended generations ago. There was nothing left to find here except dust and ghosts. But ghosts did not transmit encrypted distress calls. And dead civilizations did not scream after 200 years. Outside the Odyssey, the remains of the shattered system drifted endlessly through darkness. Twisted metal reflected distant starlight like broken mirrors. Somewhere inside that ocean of ruins, hidden beneath the ashes of an entire star system, something had survived. Something the Federation never wanted discovered. Elias slowly lifted his eyes toward the burning remains of Keeler's dead son. For the first time in his career, fear crept into his thoughts. Not fear of what was out there. Fear of why it had been buried. The year was 2479, and Earth no longer resembled the fragile blue world humanity once fought wars upon. From orbit, the planet looked engineered rather than born, its continents threaded with rivers of light, its atmosphere crossed by shimmering lanes of orbital traffic that glowed like veins around a living heart. Vast climate towers rose above the clouds, stabilizing storms before they formed. Continental arcology stretched from horizon to horizon, entire cities sealed beneath transparent domes where artificial dawns painted the sky in programmable colors. Humanity had conquered disease, famine, and distance itself. But peace? Peace had always belonged to someone else. Commander Elias Vey watched Earth rotate slowly beneath the Odyssey's observation deck as docking drones swarmed around the cruiser like metallic insects. The station above Luna Prime pulsed with constant activity, cargo freighters unloading antimatter cores, military destroyers sliding silently into slipspace corridors, civilian transports carrying millions between colonies scattered across the galaxy. Humanity had become the engine of the Federation. Builders. Engineers. Soldiers. Every major hyperspace gate in known space carried human architecture. Every Federation fleet relied on human reactors. And yet, despite all of it, Earth remained politically restrained, tolerated rather than trusted. Because of Keeler drift. 2 centuries earlier, the Federation declared humanity responsible for the deadliest disaster in galactic history. 12 worlds annihilated in moments. Billions lost. The accusation had scarred humanity forever. Federation sanctions followed immediately after. Restrictions on expansion. Heavy military oversight. Endless economic reparations that drained entire generations. Officially, humanity had redeemed itself through service. Unofficially, the stigma never faded. And Elias hated it. He stood motionless in the dim light of the observation chamber, hands clasped behind his back as streams of data reflected across the glass in pale blue fragments. His dark uniform carried no medals despite 20 years of service. He stopped wearing ceremonial honors long ago. Decorations meant nothing when every room still went quiet after humans entered it. Behind him, the bridge doors hissed open. Lieutenant Mira Solon stepped inside carrying a glowing data slate tucked beneath her arm. Young. Sharp-eyed. The kind of officer who still believed truth mattered inside the Federation. "We received clearance from Central Command," she said carefully. "Recon authorization confirmed." Elias didn't turn immediately. His eyes remained fixed on Earth below. How generous of them. Mira hesitated. "You still think they're hiding something?" That finally drew a faint reaction from him. Not surprise. Not amusement. Just exhaustion. Keeler drift was erased too cleanly, he replied quietly. Disasters leave chaos behind. Contradictions. Human error leaves fingerprints. His eyes narrowed slightly as orbital defense platforms drifted across the planet beneath them. But every record about Keeler feels edited. Polished. Like someone rehearsed the story too many times. Mira remained silent. Because deep down, she agreed. The Odyssey was not a warship. Officially, it was a deep space archaeological vessel assigned to recover historical debris from abandoned systems. Unofficially, it was one of the only ships in the fleet equipped for covert intelligence analysis beyond Federation surveillance grids. Its mission to Keeler drift had been buried beneath routine exploration orders so mundane that nobody would question them. Which meant someone in command wanted the truth hidden quietly. Or uncovered quietly. A low vibration rolled through the station as massive magnetic clamps released around the cruiser's hull. Outside the viewport, stars shifted slowly as the Odyssey rotated toward open space. The ship's synthetic intelligence spoke calmly through hidden speakers. Slipspace corridor aligned. Departure in 60 seconds. Elias stared at the stars ahead. Somewhere beyond them waited a dead system blamed on humanity for 200 years. And for reasons he could not explain, he felt as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. The deeper the Odyssey descended into the Keeler drift, the more the system felt wrong. Not dead. Wrong. Ancient debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, yet the ship's sensors kept detecting impossible fluctuations, energy readings flickering for half a second before vanishing, thermal signatures hidden inside frozen wreckage, faint encrypted pulses bouncing between asteroid fragments like whispers moving through a graveyard. Every few minutes, the cruiser's lights dimmed as radiation storms rolled across the hull with a low metallic groan. Outside the viewports, shattered moons drifted slowly through clouds of crystalline dust that glimmered like silver ash in the darkness. No one on the bridge spoke above a whisper anymore. Even the air felt heavier. Commander Elias Vey stood near the tactical display, watching holographic scans rotate above the central table. Hundreds of wrecks floated within sensor range, civilian transports, defense frigates, mining stations, evacuation barges. The official records claimed the system was obliterated instantly during the stellar collapse. No survivors. No warning. But the debris pattern said otherwise. These trajectories don't match a sudden explosion, Lieutenant Mira Solon said quietly as streams of calculations raced across her console. Some of these ships changed course before destruction. Hours before. Elias looked up sharply. You're certain? Mira nodded once. Escape vectors. Coordinated ones. A silence spread across the bridge. Because coordinated escape attempts meant only one thing. They knew. Someone in Keeler Drift had seen the disaster coming. A cold pulse settled in Elias's chest as he stepped closer to the holographic display. Fragments of destroyed vessels rotated slowly in pale blue light. One particular wreck blinked red, a Federation military carrier buried beneath layers of asteroid debris. That ship wasn't supposed to be here, Elias muttered. Official Federation archives listed no military presence in the system during the catastrophe. Yet there it was. Hidden in plain sight. The Odyssey maneuvered carefully through the drifting ruins, engines humming softly against the silence of space. Massive chunks of broken stations floated past the hull like the remains of ancient cities. Burn marks scarred the metal surfaces, not from stellar radiation, but from directed weapons fire. Elias felt his heartbeat begin to rise. The Federation lied. Not partially. Completely. Then the proximity alarms suddenly activated. A sharp pulse echoed across the bridge. Commander, Mira whispered, staring at her scanner. I'm detecting an active signal. Every crew member froze. That's impossible, someone muttered. Nothing should still function after 2 centuries inside the drift. Mira isolated the frequency, her hands trembling slightly over the controls. Encrypted transmission beacon, extremely old, origin point beneath the carrier wreckage. Elias stared at the signal pulsing softly on the display. Like a heartbeat. Waiting. Bring us closer. The Odyssey descended carefully between jagged wreck fragments until the massive Federation carrier finally emerged from the darkness outside the viewport. Even destroyed, it looked enormous. Half the vessel had been ripped open, exposing blackened corridors and frozen compartments to the void. Ancient Federation insignias remained barely visible beneath scorch marks. And then Elias saw it. Near the shattered hangar bay. A data buoy. Small. Damaged. Still blinking. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Myra's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Commander, the encryption signature matches classified Federation intelligence protocols. Elias felt ice settle into his veins. Why would intelligence operatives be operating secretly inside Keeler Drift before the disaster? Before he could answer, the buoy transmitted automatically. Static flooded the bridge speakers. Then came voices. Panicked. Alien. This is civilian convoy Theta-7 requesting immediate evacuation clearance. Another voice interrupted violently. Negative. Maintain current orbit. Federation Command has authorized phase Earthfall. The bridge went still. Every face turned pale. Elias felt the blood drain from his body. Because those words meant nothing officially. There was no phase Earthfall in any Federation archive. The recording crackled again as distant explosions thundered through the transmission. Then came screaming. Not soldiers. Children. The audio cut abruptly into silence. No one moved. No one breathed. And somewhere deep inside the drifting ruins of Keeler Drift, buried beneath 200 years of lies, the truth had finally started clawing its way back to life. The moment the final file unlocked, the Odyssey stopped feeling like a ship in space. It felt like a witness trapped inside a crime scene. The holographic interface above the command deck flickered without command input, systems overriding themselves as buried Federation encryption keys detonated layer after layer of sealed data. The bridge lights dimmed automatically, as if the ship itself understood it was about to reveal something it was never meant to see. Outside the viewport, the Keeler Drift remained still and silent, but the silence now felt artificial, staged, like a curtain drawn tightly over something bleeding just behind it. Commander Elias Vey did not speak. He couldn't. His eyes locked onto the central display as the final security barrier collapsed with a sound like breaking glass made of light. A single transmission unfolded in midair, high definition, pristine, impossible for something 2 centuries old. The timestamp burned across the corner of the image. Federation High Council, Classified War Session. The bridge temperature seemed to drop. Figures appeared in a circular chamber rendered in cold blue holography, Federation High Council members seated above a rotating star map of inhabited systems. Their faces were calm. Composed. Almost bored. One of them adjusted a data slate like they were discussing trade routes, not lives. "We are reaching saturation," one voice said. "Human expansion efficiency exceeds projection thresholds." Another leaned forward slightly. "Their industrial replication cycle is accelerating again. Keeler Drift infrastructure was rebuilt in under 9 months." A pause. Then the third voice, colder. "Then we proceed with phase containment protocol." Elias felt something tighten in his chest. Containment. Not justice. Not correction. Containment. The hologram zoomed outward, revealing the star map in full. Dozens of systems highlighted in subtle red pulses. Human-controlled space. Mining colonies. Frontier habitats. Trade worlds. Military refueling stations. All marked like targets waiting for a decision that had already been made. Mira Solon stepped back from her console, her breathing uneven. This is Federation High Command." "Yes," Elias whispered. The voice in the recording continued, almost conversational. "Keeler Drift will serve as precedent. We engineer a catastrophic failure, attribute causality to human navigation error, and enforce full-spectrum reparations. Political fragmentation will ensure compliance." A council member smiled faintly. "Fear is efficient." Elias's hands clenched at his side so hard his gloves creaked. On the display, the system labeled Keeler Drift Operation Timeline unfolded in brutal clarity. Step by step. No ambiguity. No accident. A constructed disaster. Stellar destabilization triggers. Modified navigation beacons. False distress signals planted afterward. Entire rescue fleets delayed deliberately. And then, worse. The list of compensation demands. Human colonies conscripted into Federation Labor Corps. Resource extraction quotas imposed on Earth's lunar infrastructure. Military deployment mandates forcing human fleets to serve Federation expansion wars. Every line was a chain. Every clause, a leash. Myra's voice broke the silence, barely audible. "They used us." Elias didn't look away from the hologram. "No." A pause. They built us into the system that would never question the cage. The recording shifted again. A final voice, older than the rest, seated at the center of the council chamber. Ensure humanity believes it was an accident. They are efficient when guilty. They are manageable when ashamed. A soft chuckle followed. Let them build our fleets. Let them pay for their own imprisonment. The transmission ended abruptly. No warning. No closure. Just silence returning like a door slamming shut across history. For several seconds, no one on the Odyssey moved. The bridge was frozen in the aftermath, lit only by the pale glow of the unfinished star map still hovering in the air, human worlds marked like property, not civilizations. Then the ship's systems automatically attempted to archive the file. Elias snapped back to life. Stop archival, he ordered sharply. Mira hesitated. Commander, if we... Stop it. Her fingers trembled as she executed the command. The system resisted for a fraction of a second, then complied, as if something on the ship itself had reluctantly agreed to disobedience. Elias stepped closer to the floating projection, his reflection fractured across its surface like broken glass. The Federation hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't covered up an accident. They had designed suffering with paperwork. And somewhere in the depths of the Keeler drift, the evidence of it was still waiting in the dark, blinking quietly like a wound that had never been allowed to heal. Humanity did not hesitate. There was no emergency summit that lasted days. No diplomatic hesitation. No fractured debate between colonies and core worlds. The moment the first fragments of the Federation High Council transmission reached Earth's relay network, something fundamental shifted across human space, like a single nerve waking inside a sleeping giant. And then the giant opened its eyes. Within 3 hours, every major human-controlled relay burned with synchronized activity. Lunar command stations detached encryption locks older than the Federation itself. Mars Orbital Fleet Command rerouted civilian traffic lanes into sealed corridors. Titan's deep space fabrication yards powered up dormant shipyards that had not been activated in decades. Across the scattered human colonies, systems that had been designed for Federation compliance stopped complying. Because compliance requires trust. And trust had just been incinerated. Commander Elias Vey stood aboard the Odyssey as the first wave of transmission packages began to flood open channels. He hadn't initiated them. No one on his bridge had. Yet the ship's comm systems were now acting as a relay point, broadcasting everything they had recovered from Keeler drift directly into the human network. The truth was spreading. Not like a message. Like fire through oxygen. Mira Solon watched the data streams cascade across her console, her face illuminated by thousands of incoming confirmations. They're verifying it, she whispered. Every colony. Every fleet. They're all cross-checking the logs. A pause. Then her voice tightened. They're not disputing it. Elias felt something cold settle deeper in his chest. That was worse than denial. Denial meant resistance. Debate. Delay. Acceptance meant judgment had already been passed. Across human space, Federation embassies began losing contact simultaneously. Not through sabotage. Not through attack. Simply, silence. Doors sealed. Codes revoked. Diplomatic clearance expired in real time as human authorities purged Federation access from internal systems like removing a parasite. Then came the riots. Not chaotic at first. Structured. Targeted. On Earth, citizens gathered beneath towering arcologies, watching public display grids replay the Federation Council recording on loop, every word, every calculation of human suffering displayed in brutal clarity against the sky. No one screamed immediately. The first reaction was disbelief so deep it bordered on physical shock. Then someone turned off a memorial broadcast. And the silence broke. On Mars, fleet crews stood down from Federation joint operations without orders. Entire squadrons refused launch commands transmitted from non-human authority nodes. On the outer colonies, labor divisions halted extraction cycles mid-operation, machines freezing in place as human engineers quietly disconnected control systems they had once sworn were harmless. The Federation had relied on something simple. Human obedience shaped by guilt. Now that guilt had no direction left to go. In orbit above Luna Prime, the human defense grid activated for the first time in 70 years. Not against an external threat, but in preparation for one that had already been revealed. Elias watched the tactical display shift as Earth Command issued its first unified directive across all human military assets. All Federation allegiance nullified. All shared command protocols terminated. All former Federation installations classified as hostile infrastructure. Mira swallowed hard. That's war protocol. Elias didn't correct her. Because it wasn't a declaration of war. It was a correction of reality. Far beyond the Odyssey, human stealth carriers began slipping out of lunar shadow corridors, sleek, silent vessels designed not for conquest, but for erasure of dependency. Cyber warfare divisions initiated coordinated blindness across Federation defense grids, cutting surveillance arteries faster than they could reroute. Entire supply chains feeding Federation fleets simply stopped existing in databases. No missiles yet. No explosions. Just absence. The most dangerous weapon humanity had ever mastered. Removal. Elias finally spoke, his voice low. They're not reacting emotionally. Mira looked at him. They're calculating, he continued. And whatever comes next, they've already decided it's necessary. Outside the viewport, Earth continued to rotate peacefully beneath layers of artificial light and engineered storms. A beautiful planet. A silent one. But now, for the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was no longer asking permission to exist. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Federation finally realized. The species they had built their empire upon, had just stopped pretending it was a servant. When the war ended, there was no moment the galaxy could point to and call victory. No trumpet. No treaty. No surrender broadcast from a shattered throne. There was only silence where the Federation used to be. World after world blinked off the galactic grid not through annihilation, but through something far more unsettling, administrative erasure so complete it felt like reality forgetting them on purpose. Trade lanes rerouted as if the Federation core had never anchored them. Military beacons went dark mid-transmission. Entire fleets lost coordination because their command hierarchies no longer existed in any shared system. The Empire didn't fall like a burning star. It dissolved like ink in water. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Commander Elias Vey watched the aftermath unfold across holographic space. Where red war markers once pulsed across Federation-controlled sectors, there were now empty voids, clean gaps in the map that made the galaxy look unfinished, like someone had erased a mistake too carefully. Even the stars felt unchanged, indifferent, as if nothing important had happened at all. Mira Solon stood beside him, still processing the scale of it. Her hands hovered over her console without touching anything, as though afraid the interface might accuse her of complicity if she did. "They're gone," she said finally. Elias didn't answer immediately. Gone was too simple a word. Gone meant absence. This was removal. Across human space, the confirmation came in waves. Federation military signatures ceased. Diplomatic channels collapsed. Data archives across neutral systems rewrote themselves in real time as corrupted authority permissions were purged. Worlds that had once been under Federation governance suddenly found their administrative framework stripped away overnight, leaving governments to stabilize themselves without the weight of an empire pressing down on them. And then something stranger began to happen. Human fleets did not advance. They held position. Waiting. Not for conquest. Not for expansion. Not for revenge in the traditional sense. But for something else. Verification. Elias felt it in the communications silence more than in any report. Every human ship, every command station, every relay node was cross-checking the same question across 1,000 fractured battle zones. Asterisk, is it finished? Or is this how it begins again? Asterisk. The answer came not in words, but in data. Recovered Federation core archives, decrypted and broadcast system-wide, confirmed the truth of Keeler drift beyond any remaining doubt. Not just that it happened, but how many times it had almost happened elsewhere. Dozens of suppressed incidents. Dozens of containment events. Civilizations destabilized under similar templates. Patterns too precise to be coincidence. The Federation had not been an anomaly of corruption. It had been a system of it. And systems do not die easily. In the void beyond known space, fractured Federation remnants attempted to regroup. Signals flickered weakly as surviving commanders tried to re-establish command chains that no longer responded. But every attempt collapsed under the same reality. There was no center anymore. No throne. No singular voice to obey. Just scattered fragments of an identity that no longer had authority over anything. On Earth, the reaction was quieter than expected. Not celebration. Not chaos. Something more dangerous. Understanding. Cities beneath the arcologies dimmed their artificial skies to night mode. People gathered in silence, watching archival footage of Federation councils, of human labor fleets, of centuries of enforced obedience disguised as partnership. The emotion that spread was not rage alone, it was clarity so sharp it cut through generations of confusion. They had not been weak. They had been managed. And now management had ended. Back aboard the Odyssey, Elias finally turned away from the star map. His reflection lingered in the glass, older than when he had begun this mission, though only days had passed. What happens now? Mira asked softly. It was not a tactical question. It was something deeper. Elias looked out at the drifting remains of Keeler drift one last time. The broken system still floated there, unchanged, as if it had been waiting for this moment for 2 centuries. Now, he said quietly, we learn what we are without them. The ship's engines hummed as the Odyssey began its slow turn away from the ruins, not toward home, not toward war, but toward the wider galaxy that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Behind them, the Federation was gone. Ahead of them, there was no map left that could be trusted. Only the vast, open dark. And the realization that humanity was no longer a tool inside someone else's empire. But the first unclaimed force the galaxy had seen in a very long time.